It is exactly 33 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much for staying with News Center, where we are keeping an eye on the economic survey, the 2021 Economic Survey Report, which is set to be launched by the CS for National Treasury, that is Ukur Yatani. My guest in studio, that is Stephen Mwakesi, a public policy analyst, and Wahoro Ndoho, an economist who is joining us virtually. Thank you so much. We shall be getting to your feedback in a few minutes. But Wahoro, there is something that is being reported on the Standard newspaper today, that Kenyans' deposits in foreign banks has doubled up to 247 million shillings. And that's quite a huge, sizable chunk of money being invested in foreign banks. As we await the launch of this report, what does this portray or portend in terms of the investor confidence in the country and how Kenyans are now shifting to invest, or rather to bank in foreign banks? What does this mean?
I would imagine it's a bit of it gives the impression that there's a question of confidence, not just here, but I think it's a world over. One of the things that you'll see is that in terms of crises, people tend to diversify both their sources of income, but also how they protect their wealth. So to one extent, I would not be too surprised. I would ask, though, that in the context of money flows, and especially when you take into account even diaspora remittances, what has been the trigger, quite apart from the pandemic, that has occasioned that? Because one of the things that's really difficult this time around with keeping money overseas is the whole notion of anti-laundering mechanisms throughout the world. It's made it increasingly harder for Kenyans to hide money, not just Kenyans, but anyone in the world to hide their money elsewhere. But it could also be portend well for Kenyan businesses and Kenyan business people diversifying their portfolio by investing in foreign markets. So all of that, I think, will be interesting to see how it is explained when the survey comes out.
Indeed, Mwakesi, you have heard of the figures that that the Kenyans' deposits in foreign banks doubled to 247 million. And we did see that the remittances from the diaspora nation have also quite increased in the same breath. What does this mean, or reflect, especially for how all this, how it all, falls into the country and in matters of economy, and also putting in the diaspora nation? I mean, we are seeing money coming in from diaspora, but Kenyans are also opting to bank in foreign banks.
Yeah, I mean, like what Wahoro said is quite apt. I mean, the reality is that what anyone chooses to do with their surplus funds and what they've made or their savings is entirely up to them. If they find it's more convenient to put money elsewhere, it would be something that they choose out of their own volition. Again, seeing that we've been coming from a pandemic period of COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of our currency and how it's performing against international currencies. And you'd find a lot of people would be more comfortable if they've made their money in US dollars, in whatever currency they've made their money in. They'd prefer keeping it somewhere where they feel that they'll have easier access and ability to utilize those funds when they need to. Again, the question of how does this translate in terms of are Kenyans making more, are they becoming more productive? It could be an indicator of that. Even what you can see from the remittances, it does show that there are people out there who are making a lot of money. I think this should be featured if you look at the numbers that will come out from the GNP, which is the gross national product, which captures everybody who's making money, who is a Kenyan, even outside our borders. So I still feel that it's a good indicator. I'd really encourage, although the diaspora people, to really try and look for convenient means of putting that money back into the country, reinvigorating the economy. And this would be something that, with the rebase of the economy, because again, if I am saving my money abroad, how I make my investment decisions, even in the country, would be advised by a lot of factors. And that's why we're saying with the economic survey, with the possible rebasing of the economy, it will then give investors some confidence to not have their money just sitting abroad in bank accounts, but possibly investing in these sectors of the economy that are seen to be producing or becoming growth sectors of the economy. Right. So I'm very excited to see here that Kenyans have that much money stashed somewhere, but that's literally $2.4 billion. You know, that's a lot of money, and it would be good if some of this money, if it was not based for cash flows, but entirely savings, we should encourage now these Kenyans to put this money back and reinvest it into our economy so that we can rejuvenate this country's economy.
Mwakesi, perhaps someone might argue, perhaps the reason we are seeing Kenyans choosing to even invest rather abroad or even choose foreign banks is due to the ease of doing business in the country. It has been quite a topic of discussion. I mean, the licenses involved. If you want to carry out business in the country, it is a tall order. From where you sit and by your perspective, where do we need to fix? What do we need to fix to just ensure that while we want to ensure we follow the right protocols and the guidelines, we are still making it easier for someone to opt to open a business in their estate, wherever they are in any part of this country?
Well, I mean, what you stated could be highly contradicted by certain officers in government, because as of yesterday, I think there was a release of an update of the ease of doing business, and Kenya was very bullish that it's quite easy to do business in Kenya as compared to the region. But again, yes, like you said, there might be some hesitation by people who would want to invest in the country based on certain elements that are becoming cumbersome. And I think for me, the one that's the biggest challenge for anyone who wants to invest in the country is the lack of clarity in terms of taxation and what you are meant to be charged by whom and when and why. These levies and fees and taxation, the lack of clarity and some semblance of a clear mechanism of understanding. If I put $1,000 in growing maize, this is what I expect that government will take, period. But then you have county governments revising their rates every other day. The fiscal, there's no clarity or consistency in the fiscal planning from county level. You come to different state agencies imposing different fines and levies all the time. It's not consistent. And even the national government, there's all manner of charges that come to you. And then there is also no commiserate service delivery from the agencies that you're paying taxes to. And this lack of functional clarity in terms of the taxes you're paying and how the government delivers services to a possible investor makes them very jittery about putting money into the country. Elsewhere, when you know that if I pay tax for X, Y, Z, I am assured that my business is protected, the roads are in good repair, the water is available, I'm able to conduct my business in a proper manner. I know nobody will come to my business in the odd hours of business time asking to close my factory because I've not done X, Y, Z. That is what gives investors some fear. So if we are able to be very much clear on what are the requirements from a tax component, and also clarity on regulations, that these regulations, once they're put in place, they will stand over time, the stability in terms of regulation. Most guys will be happy to put money back into the country.
Waharo, let me come to you. There is an issue which concerns Kenyans every other day, and it is that of public debt. And the Kenya's overall public debt increased from 48.6% of GDP at the end of 2015 to an estimated 69% of GDP at the end of 2020. And as of September 2020, Kenya's external public debt was 51.4% of its total debt stock of 7.1 trillion shillings. Now, that's a report by the University of Nairobi. How worried should we be, Wahoro?
Well, we should be concerned to the extent that the economy isn't growing as fast as it should. But also, one of the interesting things about that, and just to take back to the rebasing, one of the things that the last rebasing did, and it was maybe an intended consequence, was that we then moved to a higher rank in the League of Nations as far as our ability to borrow. But by being promoted to a low middle income country, we also lost on the other side of we were no longer eligible for concessional loans. And that created a gap which then we had to fill by borrowing commercially. Now, since we've done since that time, we've been able to borrow. But by being promoted to a low middle income country, we also lost on the other side of we were no longer eligible for concessional loans. And that created a gap which then we had to fill by borrowing commercially. Now, since we've done then other options open to us as a country have always been the commercial side, which is far more expensive than concessional loans. Just to give you an example, if you take a World Bank loan, in the past you would take it for 40 years and pay maybe 1 or 2%. Even 2% is too high. 1%, and you've got like a 10-year grace period. We moved from that sort of regime to one where we are no longer eligible for the least developed country facilities that are available with the World Bank. But now we have to go into international commercial markets. And in those ones, you start paying at 6% and up. And also the Euro one is all about, that's what syndicated loans are all about. And what we saw really essentially is with the last rebase, we also shifted our country's ability to borrow concessionally. Now, you could argue that now there's probably a debate in government that says, well, is there any way, maybe even this rebase, let's not assume that rebase is always about adding to your GDP. It could be about lowering it. Perhaps maybe there's a thinking out there that maybe what we'll do is you need to get back down a bit so that we are able to access more concessional loans, or we get to a place where we rebase it to a sweet spot, slightly lower than where we are, but that puts us in scope for borrowing concessionally. But as far as loans are concerned, I know there's a lot of debate about it, and I always say this. We spent 20 years building infrastructure throughout the country. You cannot go to any part of this country and not see the effect of that debt in terms of more roads, better facilities. Now, we could argue about the cost of doing it, but I hardly think we can argue about the productivity enhancing effect of having that infrastructure. And maybe more than anything else, after 20 years of building our infrastructure, it is right and proper that now the debate is about maybe we should pause and then reconsolidate. And maybe the economic surveys will give us some idea of how which sectors are benefited the most from that boom in infrastructure. But like my colleague mentioned about agriculture, I'll be very curious to see how much agriculture has actually benefited from the growth of our infrastructure. Yes, Kenyans should be concerned about the debt. I think the conversation has got to a point where it has caught the attention of government. Mm-hmm. And a concerted effort now to step back and reconcile our position to where we are, in a sense, cut our cloth to a measure.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mwakesi, what do you make of this whole debt conversation? I mean, we've seen the president not once say it is not bad to borrow, even in that interview back then when he was in Mombasa. He did say it is not bad to borrow, but the issue is how we spend our money. But in the same breath, we've seen corruption really take center stage, and we don't get value for our money. As much as there are all these infrastructure, economic projects going on, we sort of still appear to be on the red.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you can always agree with what the president said. If you're borrowing for the right purposes, borrowing is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. The only thing that for me, and again, like has been rightly said, when you put money into infrastructure, you're doing a long plan. You're not looking at the very short-term aspects of how does that really inject into the economy as at now. But there have been benefits that have come across because of the virtue of increasing or expanding our infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But I think now the thing that we need to be asking as Kenyans is that we need to now call to a stop borrowing monies for large infrastructure spending or for recurrent expenditure. Okay. That now we need to be looking at if there is any need to borrow and if there is any allowance to borrow, that we're borrowing money that is being injected into reinvigorating the productive sectors of our economy. And for me, that would be then the thing that will probably create the shift in terms of how we look at debt, and Kenyans will look at debt, because if we're putting money, a lot more money that we're borrowing into sectors such as agriculture, sectors such as mining, sectors such as construction, things that are bringing the country into some bit of productivity, then I probably think Kenyans will now see why borrowing would be something that's not too bad. Mm-hmm. Now, the question of corruption, I think it's been said quite a lot, and I think it's time that we really acted on it. The net effect of not acting on issues to do with corruption is that all these plans and agendas that these leaders have end up just melting away. And this has been the impact that has been seen also on the Jubilee administration as we see it right now.
Yeah.
Because that pilferage or the seepage of funds that would have naturally been able to see to the Big Four agenda being executed and being done in a manner that is beneficial for Kenyans, it's being washed away. So I think for me, when it comes to corruption, it's incumbent upon anybody who's setting an agenda for himself, whether it's a president or it's a governor. They need to make sure that the moment these monies hit their accounts, that they're able to take full account of them and make sure that they're deployed to what they had intended it to happen. Passing the buck won't help. In the eventual end is that some of these dreams, some of these projects end up dying. You'll have white elephant projects. You'll have projects that are substandard. There are a lot of roads which are being constructed right now, which shockingly to me are quite substandard. It's because people are so busy looking at how much kickback can go back to the people who awarded them the tenders, rather than ensuring that when we are executing this road, we will not have to do any repairs on it for the next decade or decade and a half.
Mwakesi, I'm told we're short of time, so as you bring this conversation to a close, I want to give you a minute each, you and Wahoro, and you go first. How do we fix the country's economy and ensure, because 2 million people, the World Bank is reporting, 2 million Kenyans have gone back to poverty. How then do you just fix and ensure that as a country we're able to move forward? A minute to you first.
My goodness, that's a very big, solid topic to give me, but I will tell you this. I think to fix the economy, the most important thing that we need to do is to fix our leadership, because they're the people who make the vision and who actually make sure that we are able to cater to ensuring that the monies that are put into use are spent correctly. So fix the leadership, ensure that the leadership is truly accountable and is able to have a visionary outlook, then probably the economy will actually grow much better than we see right now.
Right. Wahoro, you get the last word?
I would say is get out of borrowing locally. Get out of borrowing. The government should not borrow locally. Let the banks lend the money to business. Because more than anything else, the single biggest incentive to growing an economy is to let the private sector just thrive. And the fact that we've been crowding out the private sector for the last 10 years, I think is a sad observation to make. But government can get out of borrowing locally. Let the banks do what they're supposed to be doing. Lend money to the private sector. Let the private sector thrive.
Indeed. Right. Wahoro Ndoho, an economist, has been speaking to us virtually. Thank you so much. And I've also been in studio with Stephen Mwakesi, a public policy analyst, talking to us about, these two gentlemen have been talking to us about the 2021 Economic Survey report that we expect to be launched by the CS for National Treasury, Ukur Yatani, later today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Great. Now, it is a sigh of relief for residents of Korando in Kisumu County who have for years suffered under a choking sewer system. The government and the Water Sector Trust Fund have agreed to modernize the entire sewerage system to provide a lasting solution to sewer